I want you to take it in. How powerful it is to be standing right here in this position right now. If you're a member of the Davis family, this is the piece of ground that has defined your family for generations. And you're standing here today.
2 years ago, I traveled to Vietnam with the family of Medal of Honor recipient Sgt Rodney Maxwell Davis to visit the battlefield where Sgt Davis was killed in action. One of the organizers of that trip was Chattanooga, Tennessee native and retired Army Colonel Martin Jeremy Bowling. What you're about to hear is a couple minutes of the speech Jeremy Bowling gave from the floor of the bomb crater where Rodney Davis sacrificed himself on a grenade and saved the lives of 5 of his Marine Corps brothers.
Rodney starts to direct fire from here where we're standing. And if you look at the terrain where you are, you can see how deep the crater is. You can't do it from where I'm standing. You can't do it from where any of you are standing. You've got to be able to see over the top of the crater. And we talked about as the enemy gets close enough that they're within hand grenade range and grenades start to fall within the trench line, within the crater, you got to get out. You saw how challenging it is just today to get down in this crater. They're having to do that under fire to survive. And as soon as they get out, they start taking heavy small arms fire again, and they've got to get right back in. So imagine what is going through their minds as they're fighting for their survival right now, as they're fighting just to keep the Marines to their left and right alive. And the decisions that are having to be made right now at every level of leadership, from Lieutenant Breckeen, Sergeant Posey, Sgt Davis, down to every remaining Marine in this position, is having to do his job just to keep everyone else alive. And as the enemy maneuvers closer and closer down this tree line and the grenades become more and more frequent, we know what happened. We know exactly what happened. And so you are standing now on that hallowed ground where Sgt Rodney Davis made the ultimate sacrifice. Made the ultimate sacrifice to keep the rest of those Marines alive.
On their first journey to Vietnam back in 2019, they took a group of veterans who fought at the Battle of Hamburger Hill back to that battleground. Then, in 2024, they visited the Quai San Valley, where Sgt Davis was killed in action in September of 1967. And since that trip, Colonel Bowling, along with other organizers from those efforts, established a nonprofit called the Longest Climb Foundation. And now that group is joined with several other groups. And they're working to take more veterans and their families on reconciliation trips back to important battle sites in Vietnam. Today on the show, I talked to Colonel Bowling about the important work he and the others are doing to bring closure and healing for those Vietnam veterans and their families, and the remarkable things they hope to accomplish during these trips.
The Vietnamese came up as they were clearing the objective. They kicked him, and he had to not make a noise so they would think he was dead. And they were double tapping to make sure all the U.S. Soldiers were dead. So they shot at him, even though they thought he was dead, but they missed him. So he pretended to not move, and in doing so, he had to hide his rifle under the log where he was laying. And so he believes it's possible that that rifle might still be there because he hid it so well under that log. So, things like that, we're going to go back this time and see if we can find this gentleman. He's 80 years old, and see if we can find his rifle under that log. And we've got a 10-digit grid to where he thinks that log is in the jungles of Vietnam.
My name is Josh Rowe, and this is Tomorrow Town, Tennessee.
Summer of 25, I got a call from OSD, which is Office of Secretary of Defense in the Pentagon. And they were like, hey, we have heard what you guys are doing. Are you still doing that or interested in still doing that? And of course we said, yes, we are. And they said, well, we'd like for you to consider sort of joining this more formalized consortium of entities that are doing things to, I forget the word they use, but it's essentially reconciliation type efforts between US and Vietnam at the national level, sort of the mill to mill diplomatic level. And of course, we're like, well, we welcome that opportunity. And so they have now formalized, I use that word in small caps there, our budget, but we have to recompete for it every year. And it's not a big budget by any stretch, but at least it's something.
Yeah.
And the good news there is it takes a lot of the stress off of us trying to figure out how we're going to pay for the airfare for each of the veterans for each trip. So we're able to do a more regularly scheduled event. So we've got trips scheduled every year now for the next kind of 5+ years. And there's even talk that we might start doing more than one trip per year, although that's further down the road right now. But that consortium of people that's managed under OSD, or I guess now it's called Office of Secretary of War, it includes the POW MIA group that you've seen their flags all over the U.S. It includes the VWAI, which is the Vietnam Wartime Accounting Initiative, which is housed out of Texas Tech University, and they really do some great work. It includes the U.S. ASEAN Business Council, which Chuck Casey, who you met with us, is kind of the lead on that piece. And then it also includes the U.S. Department of State and U.S. Department of Defense, and then the Longest Climb Foundation and the Center for Military History. So it's this huge consortium of people, and we're all just sort of working together to promote and support the work that everyone else is doing on the reconciliation front with Vietnam. So it's really opened some incredible opportunities for our foundation to formalize what we're doing and then blossom appropriately. We are headed back in September, and that'll be our third trip. It'll be our biggest one yet. This time we're, as you would expect, you kind of get better with each repetition, but we're taking some medical staff with us. We've got insurance policies this time and all kinds of like formal things that we've just sort of had to underwrite the risk for in the past. And it will be another group from the 101st Airborne Division. These are the 1968 guys. And this story is special for many reasons, but two reasons. This is actually the most violent period for this regiment in the Vietnam War, but it was often overshadowed because there were other battles that just made the headlines. And so people thought sort of more of those things. But this group actually was the most violent period for the regiment. And they've just kind of been overshadowed for 60 years now. So we're going to give them a chance to be at the forefront of the Vietnam story. And the particular point of interest that I think you appreciate human interest stories, what would find appealing is that the person at the center of this is the daughter of the battalion commander that commanded these guys in 1968. So his name was Lieutenant Colonel Sheets, and he was very, very loved by his men. He was the sort of officer that the soldiers looked up to and admired him, and they kind of rallied around him. Well, he passed away about a decade and a half ago, and his daughter, who's similar in age to us, just sort of stepped up to the plate and kept kind of leading these guys. And so she became this sort of central figure in this group of Vietnam vets, this female non-veteran, but she's just a great person. And so now when you see this group dynamic, it's really interesting to see this group of sort of grizzled old Vietnam vet men that defer to her as if she were their battalion commander. And she leads that way. And so she's kind of leading the charge to get these guys back. And she has done this remarkable in-depth historical research and built all these Google Map tools. And so it really has made our job easy this time. You probably recall from the Sgt Davis, we had a hand-drawn map that we had to kind of figure out where we were going. Yeah. She has nailed this down to the 10-digit grid for each of these, and we're visiting 6 different battle sites this time. So it's really, I've learned a lot just kind of watching how she's done the history. And then we've got so many more resources at our disposal now. And I've been paired with this international nonprofit called Cultural Vistas, and they are going in front of us and locating surviving North Vietnamese veterans of these 6 battles as well. And so it's really,
wow,
it's crazy. I mean, it's really, I mean, honestly, Josh, it's surreal, I guess is the most appropriate description, that it has become this, which, I mean, I told you before, it was never supposed to be anything other than one trip back to Hamburger Hill for these guys. And every year it just keeps growing and maturing, and more people are raising their hand and saying, I want to be a part of it. So we're going to do it again this year. And then we've already committed to the group of veterans next year. And this will be a group of veterans from the 4th Infantry Division. And they're being led by a young man similar in age to us, who is sort of the central figure in that group, who's also done the historical research. He's written books, and he's become very close to this group of veterans. And I just had a conversation with their lead personality from that veteran group a couple of weeks ago. And he described for me the log that he hid behind after they got wiped out on the objective, and he was pretending to be dead. The Vietnamese came up as they were clearing the objective. They kicked him, and he had to not make a noise so they would think he was dead. And they were double tapping to make sure all the U.S. Soldiers were dead. So they shot at him, even though they thought he was dead, but they missed him. So he pretended to not move. And in doing so, he had to hide his rifle under the log where he was laying. And so he believes it's possible that that rifle might still be there because he hid it so well under that log. So, things like that. We're going to go back this time and see if we can find this gentleman. He's 80 years old, and see if we can find his rifle under that log. And we've got a 10-digit grid to where he thinks that log is in the jungles of Vietnam. Like, that's the kind of stuff that we're doing now. And it's growing that's like every day I turn around, it's growing more and more in all the best possible ways. So that's what we got going on. We're being asked to give speeches now all over the place. People are hearing about this, and they just saying this is something that is worthy, and we want to help support you guys. So we're really proud of it. I think because we all try to stay humble, we're uncomfortable that people keep talking to us about it because we don't want it to sound like we're bragging. But I think we also understand that we have a responsibility to keep telling the story, because the more that we tell the story, the more support that we get and the more veterans we can help by telling the story.
Yeah, I think it resonates in an interesting way and throughout our culture. Like you mentioned, it's not just that Vietnam veteran age cohort. Yeah. It's kind of, families and people that are military interested or connected. And when you go around and you talk about it, what's your message? What do you want people to understand about the goal of it, the thought of it?
The healing that occurs is really the central message. And the truth is, and I know I said this to you before, I never knew that would be a thing. I mean, that was not even in the top 20 things that I thought would occur on that first trip back in 2019. We were just doing it because we thought it seemed like the right thing to do for that group of U.S. Vietnam veterans from Hamburger Hill. And when we witnessed how powerful that sense of peace and reconciliation and healing was, that's when our eyes were opened, like, oh, this is a much bigger deal than what we knew at the time. And then when people kept asking us to do more of it, even though we all have lives and we were all busy trying to, keep our head above water in your normal life, you can't say no, because you acknowledge that you're in a position that you might be able to give someone else that level of healing, that level of peace and reconciliation that they deserve. I mean, as veterans who wore the flag of our country in combat, if you can give it to them, frankly, you have a duty and responsibility to do that. At least that's how we view it.
Tell me more about the foundation and kind of like what you've learned through that process. Because, when we left Vietnam in 24, it was an idea, but it hadn't fully formed yet. Can you just explain kind of that
Sure.
process?
I mean, some of the less sexy realities of it were, we had a large donor for that trip in 2024. And he was a Vietnam veteran himself who had built a very large, successful international company. And he jokingly told us, guys, if you don't formalize this, I can't get a receipt for my donation. And he was joking, but he wasn't joking. But at the time we were like, well, I guess we didn't really consider that. And so that was the impetus for us. Like, well, I guess if we're going to ask people to help us with this, we have at least the responsibility to do it that way. So it was shortly after we returned in 24 that we formalized everything, filed our papers for the 501c3. And then, like I said, in the summer of 2025, we got that phone call, and thank goodness we had already formed ourselves into a 501c3. Then we have a veteran who runs a very successful accounting firm out of Michigan call us and volunteer to be our accountant and help manage our books. And so it's those sorts of people that are a part of that extended, like yourself, frankly, Josh, but that extended family that makes this possible, that really helped this blossom into the thriving organization it is now. And so we've got multiple historians, we've got multiple authors. I mean, you name it, the list is pretty deep of people who've said, hey, I love what you're doing and I want to be a part of it. I don't need name recognition. I don't need compensation. I just want to give back to a country that is in existence because of veterans who were willing to give so much for it. And we say yes to that every time. So the medical staff that we have going with us on this trip, all volunteers.
Wow.
We've got some medical tests that we're going to provide to our veterans on this trip free of charge, have been volunteered to help them sort of manage some of the stress that they're experiencing. And, all of it is just essentially being handed to us because people say, we recognize that what you guys are doing is rare and worthy, and all of the support goes right to the veterans who need it most. And so and that's true. All of us are still 100% volunteers. And we're happy to be kind of the central figure to try to coordinate it all. So it's to say that it is an honor is an understatement of understatements, I guess.
I can't imagine someone's like-minded who wouldn't want to be, to pitch in some way. You mentioned the medical tests and the obviously the battle site trip in 24 was so powerful, but the week was outstanding.
Yeah.
I remember going to the children's center there at the end, the Veterans Center there that day that you guys spoke with them and how powerful that was. I mean, tell me, are those kind of things in place for this trip as well?
Yes.
Tell me about some of the other things other than battle site stuff.
Sure. So for all of our previous trips, we've had 1 day of battlefield circulation, battlefield visits, surrounded by 2 to 3 days of other events to close out or to round out the week. But because this trip is going to be much more extensive, we're actually going to have 3 days of battlefield visits for this trip. And I'll be honest, I'm a little nervous because remember, most of these folks are in their late 70s and early 80s.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of physical activity for them. So we also are going into it open-minded of we just may not be able to do it all, but we've put the wheels in motion for it. So because of that, we've had to really formalize what you do in the days leading up to and the final days going out of country. And the events that you mentioned were some of the more powerful events. And so those are the things that we prioritize. So when they arrive, and we'll be staying at this really neat hotel in Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City called the Rex. And the Rex is famous because that's where all the media and the diplomats stayed during the Vietnam era. And so everybody knows about the Rex Hotel. So we'll arrive at the Rex and give everybody about 24 hours just to acclimate and get past the jet lag. We'll do a big welcome dinner like last time, if you recall, where we had some members of the Vietnamese delegation and some cultural events and things like that, just to sort of roll out the red carpet and welcome them to Vietnam. The next day will be some of the veteran center type visits like we talked about, because you've got to get past the awkwardness, and it is inevitably going to be awkward for that first day, just bringing those two groups together, but we'll get past that. And then we go straight into 3 days of battlefield circulation. And then the last day will be the big state dinner. And we're going to do it different from what you experienced. Last time we had an informal setting in that seafood restaurant. And you might remember we had a lot of the fairly warm Heineken being served out of the box. That was not very appealing to anybody. So we're going to go more formal this time and have it a more diplomatic sort of mill-to-mill state dinner. to say goodbye to everyone. And then the next day they get on a plane and fly back to the States. So it's going to be go, go, go this time. But we've carved out time throughout that entire week so that they can interact with members of the media. They can interact with members from the Vietnamese delegation, and then they can also interact with the medical staff that have volunteered their time to be a part of it. Because it's a lot of the medical staff are going to be behavioral health professionals. So we're going to test them for voluntarily, of course, but we're going to make it available to the veterans so that they get tested for certain levels of inflammation in these biomarkers that are directly correlated to behavioral health, PTSD, and a handful of other things. And then they'll use that as a guide to talk about some of the things they're experiencing throughout the week.
Outstanding. It's obviously the going back and all that's important, but just overall health, moving forward, it's, you guys are, you guys do things the right way anyway, but that's a really awesome thing you're doing as far as adding an element that they can take with them moving forwards.
Yeah, sure. And we've seen that each time about how you would see the emotional experiences occurring, and you just think, wow, we need some professionals here to support that piece of the trip, and we've got them this time.
A big thank you to Colonel Martin Jeremy Bowling for this conversation. If you want to learn more about the Longest Climb Foundation, or about the book that tells the story of Rodney Davis, written by John Hollis, who is also a member of the Longest Climb Foundation team. Or if you want to see the videos from the trip we took in 2024 to Vietnam with the Davis family, I have links to all of that in the show notes of this episode of Tomorrowtown, Tennessee. This podcast is a production of News Channel 9, Fox Chattanooga, and Sinclair Broadcast Group Chattanooga. I hope you join me again real soon.